just make sure I've got all the audio. Everything should be working. So welcome to the next episode of the Tales from the Wander Inn. We've been a little intermittent with our scheduling the last several weeks. We're hoping to get back on track. It's just April and May have been complicated between vaccination schedules and people's availability, but we're working on it. So this is our opportunity to kind of decompress with some of the wandering players, talk about different Dungeons and Dragons topics, talk about the story, talk about the characters, talk about the campaigns. I'm Ray Emily. I'm your host and the Dungeon Master for the Wandering Players. And before we get started, I do want to do a quick round of introductions. So I'm going to go in the order of my screen. So Keith, let's start with you.
Keith Murray. My character is Ian Nile. He is a charlatan paladin. He is a paladin charlatan. I guess the paladin is the dominant, and then the charlatan is the lesser part of his personality.
That's not a bad thing. The good side kind of overriding the other.
I made it work. We haven't really gotten into it, but it's in terms of the backstory. I figured out a backstory that makes it make sense.
Yeah. Maybe we'll dive into that a little bit too.
Sure.
So between the other two, I'm going to go ladies first. So Leslie, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Leslie, and I play Juniper Moon. She's the Tabaxi rogue.
I just realized that.
Nice. She just wait till our Halloween episode, especially with this group. That'll be insane.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna go all out for you.
Jay, how about you?
I'm Jason Thigpen. I play a wood elf monk who's also a bounty hunter. So I'm having a lot of fun fleshing that character out and that profession out at the same time. So
Have a little too much fun sometimes. Also, Chocolate Ninja Cosplay. Give yourself a plug.
Yeah, Chocolate Ninja Cosplay. Many good things to come in the summer. Just be on the lookout. The YouTube channel is coming. A bunch of various little clips and things like that I've got coming down the pipeline. So be on the lookout.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to as vaccinations and conventions start to become a thing again.
Well, I took the band off, but I got the second dose yesterday. And today's Sunday. I got it Friday morning, and fine, a little sore, but all that's gone for the
That's good. I'm on the fence about getting a hotel just yet, because usually, Rhode Island Comic Con is the one I do every year.
Yeah.
Because Eric's my friend, and usually I'll get the hotel in advance, but it's like, I don't know, there's still time for people to go. Nope.
Yeah.
Especially Rhode Island, because they were like, no gatherings of more than 250 people at the start of this thing, and then Rhode Island Comic Con is tens of thousands of people.
Yeah,
for a weekend. I gotta wonder if
unless they ask me to do, say, like a panel or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I won't start doing cons until 2022 to give a little bit more time for people to get vaccinated, and for the different organizers to kind of work out the kinks of just getting back to things.
Yeah. Because I know there's a few cons going on over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they'll look at that. I'm sure they'll look at that and take cues from whatever goes on at.
Maybe if Brass City does something small, like I might go to one of the smaller ones versus a large crowd one. So.
Why not do it outdoors?
Well, that would be great if they could do that. I think the weather dependency might be an issue.
Yeah.
I've got two small shows that I'm hoping to get to. So one will be RetroCon in Pennsylvania. That's the end of September. But that's a really small. It's more of a toy show than it is anything else. But they have some really good guests. So they have, the star from The Greatest American Hero. They have a couple.
William Catt.
Yep. Mm-hmm. They also have a few different voice actors and other things from 80s cartoons. It's always a fun show, but it's very.
Where in Pennsylvania is it?
It's Oaks, PA. So it's right near the Philadelphia outskirts.
Oh, okay.
It's cheap. It's easy to get to. This year we're actually going to take some of this stuff out of the storage shed and try to sell a little bit. Since but
speaking of storage, do you know if the Hitting and Stabbing Emporium is going to be a thing this summer?
I don't know, because the Ren Fair is usually in when is it? October? Is it Columbus Day or is it Labor Day? I can't remember which. But that runs for like 5 weeks, so it's usually the entire month of September. I've seen some posts. I don't know what the plan is yet, but I'm sure it'll. I mean, that doesn't take a lot of preparation for.
Have a con at a fairground. That might be interesting.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, people are posting all the time, but I'm not sure what the plan is, and that's so many months out right now that
Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
Well, and like things like Dragon Con and even Rhode Island, I'm with you, Jason. I'm like 2022 will be my big show return. I'll do some smaller dabbling this year, but I'm just not quite ready to. I mean, con crud was an issue before a pandemic, and I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So.
The only thing I wanted was Steranko's autograph on a Captain America print that he did. And I was going to get it. Like, literally, it was the Northeast Comic-Con up in Massachusetts, one of the smaller ones. And then it was like the week after they shut everything down. So it was like I was this close to getting it, and then they're like, nope. So I'm not, I got to admit, I've been kind of enjoying the break. A little too much. I had to put my Captain America suit on to do a Children's Hospital promo. And or a little, thank you to the frontline people for Children's Hospital here. And I will admit, in the video, I'm holding the shield, a little more in front of me than I usually would.
It's funny because Mikey asked me for that too, and I just with work and everything, I didn't have time. But I had the same consideration because I'm like, okay, I can put on the Ant-Man helmet, but there's nothing small about what's happening below that. So I'm like, how do I shrink that down, or can I just leave it unbuttoned at the bottom and do kind of like the suit coat kind of thing? But it just
yeah. I got a new belt from White Sheep Leather that I've never worn before, and it was small to begin with when I got it, because I got it over the summer, and I look back at a picture of mine at the beginning of the summer, and this is all like I filled out. I can feel it. It's all since the beginning of this thing. So I need to get off my butt and start sweating a little bit. But that belt never fit in the first place. It was already small when I first got it, and it's a little bit smaller now.
Maybe you'll get a red bike to go along with the Ducati. So you'll ride the regular bike first for like an hour or two, and then you can ride the Ducati.
I have a mountain bike. I actually just put new tires on my mountain bike and a new seat. So I'm gonna get out on that, and oh man, that Ducati, Jesus Christ.
So before we go down the motorcycle rabbit hole that Keith will take over.
Yeah, we're here to talk about that.
No, this is good. This is because this is all about the things that we're passionate about, that kind of thing. So as we've been talking about the Wandering Players and the campaign and the Dungeons and Dragons, what we haven't really talked a little bit about is the new player kind of perspective and experience on this. So Keith, you had history in the past. I've obviously had history with this for since the 80s.
Decades ago.
But Jay and Leslie, you guys are a little bit newer to this, and so I think, and I'm going to start a little bit with you, Leslie, first. When what's been kind of some of the hardest parts of kind of getting into this, just as a game, a hobby, for you personally, as you start to get more involved.
I think for me, there's been a couple obstacles in picking up on playing the game. Obviously, having the baby, being out for a couple of the games, and just kind of figuring out life in general. So there's been a lot of like hurdles for me, because I'm usually a quick learner, and I think it's a little bit of a hassle for me to figure out, like, when we level up and we get all of these new like cantrips or spells, like the situational times where when I'm to use them, or like if I take an action, what can I do right after, or if I don't take an action, like what things I can do. Those are things that I'm having like small troubles with, that I'm kind of figuring out as I listen to the other players do their turns. Which you and I still have to get together to talk about that.
Speaking of the baby, where is her precious little self?
She's sleeping right now. She might wake up.
Wake her up. Pinch her. Wake her up.
Okay.
We want to see her.
Keith has never been a parent. You do not wake up a sleeping child. You just
When she wakes up, I'll bring her in. She'll probably wake up in the middle of this whole entire thing, and you guys will see a baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been the involved uncle. I can always hand him back, you know.
Yeah, but not through the TV, the
I
computer.
rile them up before they go to bed. That's my job.
That
Okay.
does not surprise me. That does not surprise me. And it's interesting, Leslie, because I think the other thing, again, you've been, as you said, between different obligations, not being able to be as part of so many sessions, you're a little bit behind the curve because you haven't had that experiential development, right? As we go through this, and we'll set up those separate sessions still to kind of walk through kind of the combat. I almost thought about doing something like that here, like just doing kind of like a hey, let's real quick. The three of you are fighting something. Let's talk through it, but. It's Sunday and I don't want to think too hard right now. But, Jay, what about you? Because I don't know, did you have any experience before you started playing
With D&D?
Yeah.
So in addition to D&D, we also belong to a Commander Magic the Gathering group. And one of our good friends, Josh and Kasha, they actually introduced us to D&D. Probably, put it this way. When you asked us to do this whole thought experiment, we said yes. And that's when I first heard about D&D, like just really thinking about it and like, you know, finding the handbook and stuff like that. And then maybe 3 or 4 months later, Josh and Kasha, they were just like, oh, let's have a campaign. And they physically gave us the book so we can like thumb through it. And we had a session 0 with that. And then, things happened where, it started to get colder. And then unfortunately he started chemo and whatnot, because his cancer had come back and whatnot, where they found cancer. And so that kind of got put on hold. And then our group, the Wandering Players, that started. Yeah. And so this is our first actual hands-on, D&D experience.
I'm honored. So for you, in your character, and we'll get into this a little bit more, your character's got a lot of different layers of complexity, I think, that we haven't even scratched the surface on a little bit. But what's been some of the challenges, like with just from a player perspective for you, similar to Leslie, coming into this?
Are you asking me or are you asking her?
Asking you.
Okay, so for me, it's one of the not necessarily a struggle. I'm just being mindful not to interrupt another player during their role playing and like during some of the choices that they make. Whereas my character is very brash and very sarcastic, more like blunt sarcasm. And I don't want that to come off as me personally versus that's the character I'm trying to portray. And because my character is very, very, very snarky, and he's more like, I told you so. And you should have been this. You should have been more smarter with your actions. And now you're going to be dead by the end of the afternoon. And that kind of thing.
I would love to see you have more fun with that.
Yeah. There's some things in the works.
Yeah.
There's some things in the works. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I go back to the tension after the Etten scene in the mountains kind of thing. And as a DM, I'm also I have to kind of read between, like, okay, is this real or is this Memorex? Like, which side is this kind of going?
Yeah.
As tensions start to develop. And God, I'm dating myself with my references now. I think Keith at least got the Memorex reference. So here's a question actually for Keith. So looking at that and looking at some of what Jason just talked about, what's your perspective, kind of sitting back and watching this a little bit and some of these interactions and how Ian would necessarily play off of it or how the rest of the group has been doing so?
Well, it's funny. There's another game I'm playing, and in that game, my character is a Goliath. And while I was working on that character, for some reason, I ended up watching Logan, The Wolverine, and X-Men Origins. So my character ended up being like, he's not stupid. Everybody keeps referring to him as a golem, and he's a Goliath. He's not stupid, but he's a real asshole. And he's like, he makes a lot of like crappy comedy. He's very difficult. He's very surly. He's very much like Wolverine. And he's got that lower growl, and he just kind of like says a lot of things under his breath, and and obviously that's not me. So it's fun to play that thing. And I think we all know that you're not your character, that you're, I mean, you've got some attributes in common with that, but you are not fully 100% that character. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see you more fun, like getting into that and being that way, because we all know you're not that.
Yeah.
In terms of that whole thing with marking things up, it was like, I don't know. To me, it was kind of much ado about nothing. I didn't, if it was a character thing, okay. Ian, I don't think my character necessarily had a problem with it, but he's got that weird dichotomy of the Charlotte and Paladin thing. So there's like, he's got a light and dark. So I didn't chime in because it's like, you know what? I don't have a problem with marking, these things up because it leaves a trail, but it lets other people know not to screw with us, which I'm fine with because, you're with us, we're part of the thing. So I don't know, but it did, I will say this though, it did come on the heels of wanting to dig up dwarf graves, wanting to grab gold out of the gold mine surreptitiously, there was something else too, I think with the dwarves in the caves or the gnomes, and there was something in there too. So it's like, all right, we gotta keep an eye on you to make sure you don't get the rest of us in trouble.
I forget before the grave robbing thing.
But it's been entertaining. I mean, it's funny to have to sit there and go, hey, whoa, wait a minute.
I was gonna drag the NPC back, kicking and screaming.
Yeah, that was another. Or we were all worried you were gonna murder the mayor of that town. Like you were gonna go in and talk to her. Like, oh crap, there's only one person gonna come out of this alive. So
it's actually funny.
It gives a little bit of tension that has actually made it fun.
You weren't the only one to ask about the town master after this, because your Deimos stayed behind to talk to him, and then nobody had seen the town master since then because they didn't have an encounter. And I got at least one text from another player. So did Deimos kill the town master? And I'm like,
yeah, I think I DM'd you during the week. I think it was like 3 days after the game. I was like, so, dude, did he off that guy?
It's like, well, you'll have to wait to see.
But it adds, I like it because it does add like this odd little, not necessarily a cliffhanger-ish thing, but there's this little bit of mystery that like, all right, what did he do? What's he gonna do? And it makes us, we gotta keep an eye out. But that whole thing with the cutting thing ended up taking on a life of its own that it didn't necessarily have to be that big of a deal. But
I think
we do have to watch your character because you do engage in some shit.
Yeah, please watch my character. I think that came on the heels of the encounter itself. Just to recap for everybody who wasn't there, we were fighting a giant in the snow. So now all of our movement is halved. And this giant, I think, up until that encounter, everybody had been rolling like 50%. Like their rolls were like they were hit or miss. Horrible. So when I saw this giant, I was like, yo, this is gonna be bad. So my character looks out for number one. So therefore, I was waiting for an opportunity of attack that never presented itself. So by the time my turn order came around, the creature was already dead because people were getting like crit rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I divine smited him at the end.
Yeah, and the only reason why I feel like they were able to do that is because Juniper, what'd you hit him with?
The debilitating laughter thing. Yeah.
Hideous laughter. Yeah.
So it immobilized him. So he couldn't do anything. And then the majority of our group are ranged like characters, and so they were just lighting this giant up. And I'm a monk, so I need to be up close and personal. And then from where my vantage point, I was maybe 40 feet. I was hidden, but I was maybe about 40 feet from the target, which I could have.
Didn't you have to waste a turn making up distance, closing the distance?
Yes.
Yeah, because I had to come down the embankment.
All right.
And then I went around it. I flanked it to try to get behind it. But by that point, it was already dead because I think Mark he actually figured out how to roll right and act properly. And ended up doing like something like 50 points of damage to this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went nuclear, and it's funny that you mentioned your action and everything, because what people forgot was you purposely said, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to hold my attack until he comes with. It wasn't that you weren't participating in the combat. You were just, your strategy was essentially, if it comes closer, that's going to be my opportunity because I'm a melee fighter. And
Yeah.
that got lost. It wasn't that you were just kind of sitting back at the campfire making a s'more while everybody's fighting the enemy. It's, you had a strategy. So.
And I think what is it? My character has Mask of the Wild,
Yep.
which allows me to essentially vanish, kind of like blend in with everything. So they saw that as just like me ducking out of the conflict. I was like, it would have been much different if say, you know, the giant was within striking distance of everybody, and he could have just cleaved the entire party, and then I just stayed back. I can understand that.
Yeah. But see, I appreciate the strategy because I've always, you know, a lot of the games that I've played outside of Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of like the military simulation stuff like that, are all strategy games. So I like the idea that you're paying attention to strategy and not just doing like ready, fire, aim, or, you know, like my character. I gotta find more stuff to do with my character because Divine Smite is just eviscerating. I mean, I think there are at least 2 characters that I got 30 hit points on with Divine Smite and Hunter's Mark, and it's like, okay, it's the go-to. It's the biggest thing I've got. I can use it enough times. I need to find more interesting things to do with him than just Divine Smite. And I haven't had a chance to engage in like strategizing the way you did with your attack in that one. I'd like the opportunity to do more.
Yeah.
I'd like to have more of and plus as a group we don't strategize either, which I think
that comes to my next point.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Ray, like, how does player versus player work? Like interactions, because there are some times where I want to swing at some of the people in our campaign just to stop them from doing things. Like we have a Tabaxi in our campaign that is not gun shy at all. And I feel like once our DM realizes that we kind of got things under our belt, we're gonna run into something that we're not gonna be ready to do.
One of the first encounters we had before we went into the Goblin Cave, and you and I'm literally talking to you, going, okay, we're the first ones at the front of the group. The goblins are right there, and I'm like, all right, you know, Deimos. He's like, how do you want to go at these guys? Because there's 3 of them, and the next thing we know, there's like a chromatic orb flying over our heads, and it's like, wait a minute.
I'm like,
we were talking about what to do here, and I've had this in another game I'm playing, where someone's about to get a giant axe across their heads in that game because they keep doing things like that. It's like you gotta, you know, I mean, I think we're finding our rhythm, but the idea of actually looking at people's talents and abilities and trying to make them work better together.
That's one of my biggest difficulties is trying to figure out how the team works well together because everybody does something different.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here and just like, all right, so I need to learn how to strategize and use my character, but how can I use my character to help the group as a whole? And it makes it very hard when everybody does something different, or someone interjects in someone's role playing, where there have been situations like that where they want to do something and they're like, well, why are you doing that? And I'm just like,
Well, and there's a couple things too, and there's a lot here, right? So I'm going to kind of pull this apart a little bit. Like for you, Leslie, you know, with Juniper, you're typically a rogue in most of these cases. In the wilderness, you'd be the kind of the point person, right? You'd be the stealthy one, kind of looking up front, watching for traps, those kind of things. We have other characters that, for whatever reason, tend to do that, right? They tend to go up front. They're not necessarily looking for traps, and they're not being as stealthy, but you know, they're taking point. Whereas I would usually see a rogue doing that or scouting ahead, kind of thing. Your character, as we get into some more urban settings, I think will also, you know, find between investigation, picking locks, other things of that nature, you're going to find other opportunities where you can really kind of jump in and do things that other characters can't do. But I do think with Arcane Trickster, which you saw in that last combat, you're not just sneak attack now, right? It's not just about melee. You can do things from a distance, and I agree with Jason. That fight went very differently because you used Hideous Laughter, right? That would have been a probably much more drawn out bit of a slog. Somebody was going to get hurt until you did that. So there's going to be we got to figure that out a little bit. But this, my hope is, as the settings continue to change, and I'm trying to make sure that we're not just all doing dungeon crawls. We're not just all doing wilderness. We're not just, I'm trying to space it. So we haven't really gotten to that, to some of the environments that you're probably best going to be shining, but we're going to get there eventually. To answer your question, Jay, PvP works just like combat. So if a player, and I've had it happen, and I'm happy when it happens, because honestly, the reality is you guys are thrown together. This is a very makeshift group. You're not a family. You're associates, right? Some people have longer connections than others, but we've got 7 characters with very different backstories that have all just come together for what seems to be a little bit of a common cause, but the reality is everybody has a different perspective on that cause, right? Not everybody's seeking the dragon because they want to learn about the dragon, or seeking the dragon because they want the treasure, or thinks it's going to be a challenge, or they're just like, what the hell, I got nothing else to do. Everybody's got a different feel on that. But when we do if a player were to attack another player, basically works just like combat. If somebody says, hey, I'm going to smack him up the head, okay, roll your attack. And if there's any sort of, and that's how I play it out, because that's how reality is. And we've all been around people where we're just like, whack, slap somebody in the head, right? Okay, well, if you do,
don't be surprised if I level up my attributes to, like, even though my main talent is Dex, I might throw a few in Strength so I can double like people and knock people prone. Just be like, you guys, what are you doing? Like, knock it off.
I think we need to pay attention at what the other player's strengths are. Like, knowing that about Leslie's character now, I think it makes more sense to try to, like, strategy wise, when we're going to the woods or whatever, to put her in front. Or if she can do a spell, like, I had no idea she could do a spell like that. Knowing now that she can do a spell like that, we've got to utilize that better. When something comes up, not just, okay, roll for initiative and see who attacks first, but like, all right, let's plan on having her do this as part of our attack.
The biggest difficulty is that I'm all about strategy, because I work in a regulatory world, in my normal regular life, and it's all about strategy. And we need to know who we're working with, what they're like, what their attributes are, and that's something I feel like the team, at least in D&D right now, we don't know what each character does, and is capable of. And what their strengths are, and I feel like if we did our homework for all the characters, we would be able to work better as a group.
Yeah, and I think
if each of us just put like a little quick page together, saying, all right, here's my best attack, here's a couple other abilities. So as we get into a situation and we look at it, it's like, all right, in this thing, maybe you do this first, and we follow up with this, and you try to do that. And it might not always be that, like, Divine Smite not always be the way to go. It's not a bad way to go as far as ways to go are. But in terms of strategizing, it'd be a better idea if we all, had some little page in front of us that listed, what everybody's best attributes were, abilities were.
Because I'm, I have a vivid imagination, and like, I hear what both of you guys are saying, but the tension in our group works well because one, my character is selfish, and then the two of us are essentially D&D newbies, and whereas the other 4 are kind of like well-oiled machines because they've been doing D&D and other campaigns much longer than I have, or we have, and I feel like the not knowing what everybody can do adds flavor to it, and we're just kind of like working like, well, why did he do that, and how can we mesh? And there could be like some sort of something from a DM perspective, some sort of catalyst that forces us to work together. You know what I mean?
The death of Agent Coulson.
Yeah, something like that. Or we get knocked into a dream state and we're all unconscious, but we think we're still conscious and we're doing things, and then we all die, but it was just a dream. And it's like, oh, we got to work together in order for us to, to get out of it or something like that.
I'm going to point something else out. There's also that other hurdle of those people who are more well-oiled machines, kind of not giving the opportunity to those who are less oiled in the D&D world. Mm-hmm. So it's like when you're trying to do something, there's always someone talking over you. and it's very difficult to try to do something or ask a question when immediately it's like, oh, I want to do this and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, so when do Keith or I should say Ian, the Deimos and Juniper get an opportunity to.
Yeah, and there's a couple things here, and I'm going to address some of the comments too in the chat because I see Mikey's watching us. Hi, Mikey. Yeah, the whole metagaming piece about the abilities. I'm with Jason on this. I think it's better to kind of the discoveries that you make about the other character's abilities should be experiential. It should be from encounters that you have, like the hideous laughter thing that Juniper did. People now will know that because they were there when she did it, right? But they don't need to know all of the things that's in her back pocket. Those will come.
But we should be keeping track of these things
Well,
as they
I
come
don't
up.
mean
but that's you as a player, right? You can you can do that.
I'm not trying to say like you need to know everything about the player, but what their strengths are.
Right.
What they're really good at. Everything else they don't need to know about.
Well, and I think that's again something that if you think about just real life, so a team comes together, right? And keep in mind you're barely level 4. It feels like you should be a lot longer because we've been going for like 6 months now, but we're only like going down session 10, level 4. The number of encounters that you've had, and really, when you think about it, you didn't really come into your own until level 3, right? That's when you get all these archetypes and all these other things that you get to do. It takes a while for any team to say, you know what, these guys are really good at defense. These guys are good at offense. This guy's really fast. This guy's really hard working, whatever it is. And this guy's really good at carrying the water. But you figure that out over the course of potentially part of the season. And we're in the very early stage of the season. If this was the NFL, we'd be probably at the quarter mark, right? Of you guys kind of coming together as a team, feeling each other out. And you had no preseason. We had a session 0, but there was nothing to develop. Sports analogy aside. So I do think as we go, it is, to your point, Keith, incumbent on everybody to kind of recognize what people can do. And then in some cases, maybe even from a strategy perspective, then start to advocate for those people to do things. Right? It's like, okay, I hear you, and Mikey, I'm just calling you out because you're listening, but I hear you vibrant on that. But Juniper, we've seen her do this. Maybe she's better suited for that. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And you work through it that way. Somebody, Markwood Ware said something about player versus player to break up the party. That's where there's two elements, and we talked a little bit about it. That's where we make sure that as those things happen, that it's done in the vein of the characters, not the players, that there's a separation between the two. And that's also incumbent on me as a DM to recognize the triggers that lead to that, right? So if it makes sense from a character perspective, and it's just a little bit of okay, they had a scuffle, now they're going to share a beer, and this is going to move forward, it's a good tension.
Yeah.
Well, you have to balance that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Me and Mark, after that moment, we talked about it for a little while later that day, and just like, it was like, are we good? And I was like, yeah, that was just my character. And he's like, oh, okay, because we want you to know this is where I was coming from, and this, that, and third. And I was like, because we're all really good friends in real life, so it's not just like, this is a D&D like plug group. You know what I mean? We're just, we met on a forum and we just decided to do it. We're all.
We've all known each other for like 5-6 years at this point.
Yeah. So we shouldn't let anything like a disagreement over a style of play come between us.
Like what they say, what happens at D&D stays at D&D.
Well, but and I think the other part too, and we've talked about this a little bit on some of the other things, and even during our sessions, is there's also the online piece that kind of takes away from some. Because when we're around the table, you can pick up on physical cues. You can pick up on somebody wanting to voice their idea. In a virtual setting, it's a lot harder. So to your point, Leslie, about people talking over everybody, I sometimes have to, one, stop myself from talking over players. But then I'm trying to be better about saying, okay, you know what? I heard what you guys said. Jay, what do you want to do? Leslie, what do you want? I'm trying to factor those in before we make a decision point. The challenge is always keeping the pace of play going, but also making sure that everybody has a chance to be able to speak up and contribute and get their ideas across, because it's easy to get lost.
For sure.
Leslie, we didn't talk much about Juniper. Juniper's been, again, some of this is obviously with challenges and how often you've been able to play, but you're picking up now. But, she feels rather reserved a bit, a little bit kind of watching everything kind of going on. But you want to offer a perspective maybe about where you kind of see Juniper's mindset, role play style, and kind of all this? Jay's the brash one with Deimos. Where does Juniper kind of fit in?
I like to play my character more as an observant role. Being as I like to see what everybody does and what everybody's character is doing, because that's how I learn or am learning what everybody's strengths are. And I like to, I don't know if you've noticed, when we've had our discussions in developing my character, I'm more interested in the investigative and the charisma and just kind of, I can't even figure out the word. Um,
When you're more inquisitive?
yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes. I'm sorry. I still have what's called pregnancy mom brain, and I can't develop some sentences sometimes. So that's more, and that's me as a person in general. I'm very observant. I'm very quiet, and then when it's time that I see myself as like, oh, this is where I can jump in and actually put my attributes in this, how I can help the group as a whole do this thing. And it's also the background of my character. She's been through some stuff, and she doesn't trust people either. So there's that which is why she's very observant. She needs to know what people are doing. She needs to know what what they're going to do. There's more that I've been thinking about and kind of going back and forth on how to continue developing my character, which I don't want to discuss here. I want to discuss it more with you, Ray, because I want to get your inputs and your ideas. Because as you said, I didn't even realize that it has been 6 months that we've been doing this. Time has gone by very quickly, and out of those 6 months, I was out for what? So I haven't really had the opportunity to develop my character the way that I've wanted to. And I want to start doing that, and I want to start getting more educated on how to do that and how to be more involved in work.
And,
We should put her out front. We should put you out front more then.
Oh yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. I like fighting. I like attacking. So I'm sitting here what can I do? I want to attack. I want to kill something. So.
Yeah. It's I've thought about it because I've had to run your character by proxy, and it kind of forced me to learn what an arcane trickster rogue can do. And so I built my character initially off of the Raikage from the Naruto series, and who's part brute, part pro wrestler, part leader tactician. So, and one of the things that he has is his younger brother is his tag team partner essentially.
I'll be back.
And then they have these baby time. And
okay.
They have these tag team moves essentially. So, she's a rogue. Her movement, I think I have the fastest movement in the entire group, but her movement is really good too. So if she went this way and this way, and if it weren't for what do you call them? The initiative rolls, where you never know who goes in what order. If we ever found ourselves in a situation where it's her first and me first, or vice versa, where she would do something and then I would do something right afterwards. And kind of wombo combo.
Yep.
But
you might even be able to do that with a bonus move, because the other game I'm playing, one of the characters is a tree elf, and there's a thing in the X-Men where I think Colossus used to pick up Wolverine and throw him at somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And my character being the Goliath, we've been planning at some point. We've been wanting to use this thing where I pick her character up and throw it.
The
Nice.
fastball special, which Bog has been talking about doing with Fletch for a while now too. And one thing to know too about the initiative, so initiative sets the order, but when you think about typical combat, so let's say we have seven players and a group of monsters, so we have 8 initiative rolls in that group.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, even though there's things like holding and reactions and so forth, all that combat in that one round is 6 seconds. That's everything happening kind of in the same. So typically the way I'll play it, especially if you want to do something that's a kind of a tandem piece where you're working with somebody, if you want to hold your action until like somebody in a later piece does something, and then you want that, we can do that, and we can work that out as part of the normal action economy of a combat round. So it's something people tend to forget sometimes, because you roll initiative and you're thinking it's all 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, no, that's a way to maintain order when people are rolling and what they're doing. But the reality is that's all happening in a 6-second span. The next round is another 6 seconds. The next round is another 6 seconds. So there's a lot of simultaneous things going on.
Okay. Good to know. It's really good to know.
That's why we're here. So Keith, so, we talked a bit about, well, we talked a lot about Deimos and Juniper, and we mentioned at the beginning about Ian's charlatan kind of background. We haven't really gotten a chance to really explore some of that, but right now, from a role play perspective, how are you kind of playing Ian in the context of this group? Again, you feel like another character that's kind of reserved, hasn't been very much in the forefront, but just kind of.
Well, we got some big personalities here. Bog kind of like burst on the scene, and hilarious. He is entertaining as hell. And he's, and then like even Mikey, Mikey's vibrant, and Mikey knows a lot about the game. Mikey's a great DM. I've had the pleasure of playing with him once when he was DMing. He knows a lot about the game, and then we are in a lot of ways. You can see how everybody. Oh hey, tiny human. How everybody's characters are informed by their own personalities to some extent, because you've got Molly is Zoe's friend. And that's a very Molly thing. And everybody's kind of like, everybody's got their own little personality in there. So Ian, I worked up this background for him that informs the Paladin charlatan thing. But given the situations we've been in, I think he's been more Paladin, and the charlatan part hasn't really had to come out, except like, when we were negotiating with the dwarves over the gold mine, and they're like, "Oh, we'll give you 20 pounds." I'm like, no, you'll give us 40. That's a bit of the charlatan, because as a paladin, that really shouldn't make a difference to him. But the charlatan part of it and his background, especially because we were in a mine, and that whole mining thing, has a big part of his background. So that was very that was very charlatanish of him to, no, you're going to give us more because you can. And we know you can. You have a whole freaking mind. It's a decent sized group, and it's tough to get in edgewise because we do have large personalities, and everybody's got their abilities, and it's kind of tough to find your moment to get in there. And for the most part, I've been kind of content to like hang back and let other characters kind of have their personalities more known, because I think Ian is more reserved. I don't think he necessarily wants the charlatan side to come out, at least not within the group. That's something, because he's not going to, part of his thing is that he doesn't take advantage of anybody who either can't afford it, or the other thing, and this comes from that BBC show Hustle. The number one rule of the Hustle is you can't cheat an honest person, because obviously, if they're an honest person, they're not going to fall for the hustle. And the second rule is you never hustle anybody who can't afford it, who can't take the hit. So there hasn't really been an opportunity for him to do it in this group. But he did take advantage of the elves, and there's been a couple of times where he's kind of, leaned towards that a little bit. So maybe as we get out among more people in different situations, it might come out a little bit more.
There's a bit of a Robin Hood aspect there. And I think the other thing that's nice too in 5e, where in previous edition, I started with 2 a long time ago, but alignment for a paladin, lawful good, used to be very restrictive, right? There was only so many bites at an apple that you could do something different, and then your alignment would change, and then it sets you down an entirely different course of action with a paladin.
Was alignment even a thing with first edition?
Yeah.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause I was like 12 years old.
Yeah. 5e's relaxed it a lot. Like, alignment used to be the end all be all. Now it's kind of a throwaway thing on your character sheet to some degree. But from a moral compass perspective, it used to be like you were very struck. Like a druid was supposed to be neutral, like true neutral, which is incredibly difficult to actually play.
Yeah.
And the thing like now, and Mikey put it, alignment's more the guidelines and hard set rules. Now it is more just kind of a moral kind of framework that you operate within, but allows more flexibility than the previous
And it should,
editions.
because I mean, people are flexible in that respect. I mean, you could be very, very good, and then it takes. I can't remember what movie, but it takes one bad day to make you into something else, or one situation where it's like, you know what, I'm not going to be that anymore. I need to do this thing for this situation. So it should be flexible.
Yeah, and so it's interesting though, because one of the things that I think people forget, because we have been going for so long since our session 0. You guys are the 3 that started in Neverwinter, right? You were the 3 who started together at the stables, getting on this cart. We haven't actually explored some of the reasons as to why you were all getting on this cart at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good detour. We're chasing dragons now.
Yeah.
Really, we
And
have one job.
good. Yeah, well, and I think that's the interesting part too. And so this is going to be a bit of a tougher question, because I guess I'm going to ask you to kind of maybe hint at some things without getting too much of a reveal or whatever you're comfortable with. But each of you had some different motivations for leaving Neverwinter, for getting on and finding yourselves where you are. None of them, I recall, had to do with a dragon per se.
There.
So I don't know if maybe Jay, we start with you. Is there do you want to hint a little bit about maybe some of your motivations, a bit about why you first got on that cart leaving Neverwinter?
I got on that cart seeking information, and I am still on the hunt for information in order to liberate some things, and that's the best I can describe.
Tendency to do that, liberate things, or want to liberate things.
Yeah, the want to liberate things.
Shiny things.
Of shiny things, and then or people, and things of that nature. I'm very unscrupulous, to say the least. My character kind of does things as a means to an end, and all of it is justified. There's really almost no line that my character isn't willing to cross to accomplish his goals. So,
that was the perfect level of detail, because it just scratches enough to just kind of give you a glimpse of what's underneath the silver of the lottery ticket, as it were. Juniper, what about you? Why did you get on that cart? Or the hints about why you may have gotten on that cart? We haven't actually explored all this yet.
Got into some trouble. Had to run. Find a new life. So I took my pet mouse, got on a ship, found these knuckleheads, got together in a cart, and now we're chasing dragons.
Knuckleheads.
So, and that's a good point. I forgot about Bandit. So between Bandit and Taylor, we should figure out what we can.
This is Bandit now.
Perfect. Ian, what about you?
It's funny because I went back and I take fairly copious notes.
I know I've given you time to go back and read your notes, by the way.
I appreciate that. So Ian had a duty to be on the cart in the first place. And as events have unfolded and we finally got to the town that the cart was supposed to go to. Was it Winter? What was the name of the town?
So Phandalin was where you were going.
Phandalin, okay.
Yeah,
as we got into Phandalin and things unfolded in Phandalin, it turns out that I think going after this dragon is a continuation of that duty to, and I'll throw the word protect. He had a duty to protect that wagon from the beginning and see that it made its journey to its conclusion. And I think this going out on this particular hunt is an extension of that duty to protect.
Good. That's a good way to put it. And so on that, so you've left Phandalin, you've been in the mountains now for what probably seems like forever. And so I'm kind of curious your thoughts about, both the journey so far, as well as the destination. Like, was there certain things that surprised you, or were there certain things that, in retrospect, you think maybe you would have done differently? And I'm just looking for like one or two examples here. But as we've gone through all these maps and encounters, you're now at these gates of this keep, trying to escape this storm, and something in the winter storm that's potentially pursuing you. Just curious about your thoughts as to the journey so far, and where you might have changed course or were surprised by something and so forth. And I'm going to start with you, Keith, just to kind of go back around.
I think you've done a very good job of making it Oz-like. We're going down this yellow brick road and we're encountering all these different characters, and each set of characters that we've come across has done something to either enhance our ability as a team, like the gnomes by giving us some objects and stuff like that, or the guys in the mine. Was it dwarves in the mine?
Yep.
We got some money out of them. We had a little side adventure, but everybody so far has added into what we're doing and helped build us up for what we're doing. And you've done a great job in characterizing all of those things. I don't think anything's been particularly like surprising. The little side trip with the Manticore and the woman in the tower was entertaining, and having to go back and deal with the mayor, that whole little side thing, that was fun. It doesn't seem, unless I'm missing something, and I could be, maybe that has something to do with the bigger picture. But as a little side trip, if that's all it was, that was fun and entertaining in and of itself. But in terms of anything like being surprising, nothing has. I haven't yet had like a holy crap, didn't see that coming moment. I mean, shit's gonna come at you while you're on the trail, and it's like, all right, wind's blowing, someone's gonna fall. There's a big deep crevasse. There's danger there. Okay, we're going down the trail, another monster. So nothing is like jumped out like that, but it's still been fun because of what you've done with it and the characters that we have so far met along the way. That answer your question?
It does. And thank you for the compliments. Jay, what about you?
That side quest to go into the mountains, into that little tower and whatnot. I thought we were going to get more of that, and then the dragon chase kind of led us into the wilderness, essentially. Because right before we left the town, like I had a mission to do something quite different, which is fine. And then like I have to there have been moments where I'm just like, you know what, I'm just gonna leave this party. And I'm just gonna go. I'm either gonna go back to town or go back to the next main town and figure things out from the narrative standpoint of what I was doing before I was a part of the collective. Because I feel like the more I get off that track, and if this were like a real world scenario, it would come back to bite me in the ass because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's like I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying seeing these guys do the different things and like throw arrows and miss terribly or hit spectacularly. And then we was like, oh, we have a room full of gnomes and barbarians and stuff like that. Let's figure out where we can get them to a choke point and then squash them together. Nope, they're just coming at us like, oh, all right, here we go. Let's do this.
It just occurred to me that we ran into those changelings in the throne room with the gnomes, and it's like, all right, they were there for. Did we ever figure out why they were there or who sent them there? Or okay, so there's maybe a side mission right there. I mean, it seems like seeds are being planted, and we're just waiting to see how this all fleshes out, which is good. That makes it fun.
And I'm not going to spoil anything about anything that's happened or anything that will, but going back to your point, Jay, about some of the stuff that you were tasked to do that you haven't gotten to do yet, a lot of those are all things that we will eventually at some point come around to. And the reality is a lot of these, because I think everybody had different elements of their backstories, a lot of different side quests, those kind of things. One of the things is there's repercussions makes it sound negative. And in corporate speak, we try not to use.
You said the repercussion sounds what?
sounds
Negative.
negative.
Okay.
But the reality is decisions that you make, whether it's to pursue a quest or not to pursue a quest or to go a different route for now or whatever, everything has some level of a repercussion. It could be maybe something gets more of a foothold, or it could be that there's a broader impact for something else, or maybe there's a missed opportunity. It's not always going to be necessarily the negative consequence of doing so.
Mhm.
But your point about, sometimes I just think I should leave this party and go do that. That's a different challenge altogether. Then it's like, okay, well, you're gonna have to sit out for a while until we get back to that town.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of the collaborative storytelling, right? And the role playing that we're doing. But I'm not forgetting all these other seeds, and we'll pull on those threads when we get back to it, so they won't be lost. And part of the fun for me is, I've tried not to, even though it's a yellow brick road, I've tried to make it so there's different colored bricks that you can choose. At each stage, there's at least different opportunities that you can choose. I don't want to lose sight of the ones not chosen, so we can circle back. And that's a part for me that's fun because I can work into the story in different ways, so we do
Yeah.
come back and it doesn't feel as foreign.
Yeah, because you dropped a lot of lore on me in the tavern, back at the hotel at the inn, and there's a lot of like names dropped and some places dropped, and it's like I haven't heard any of that yet as we've been going through this. So it's like, all right, maybe this stuff is still gonna come around because I think that stuff kind of falls under the heading of the duty that I am under, and we haven't quite gotten. So I'm kind of, now that Jason mentions that, it's like I'm kind of in the same boat where it's like a bunch of stuff was dropped on me at a point in the game, and it's like it just occurred to me now that, and looking back at my notes from that conversation to try to figure out what my motivation is, that I had the same thing where there's a bunch of things that were dropped on me, and it's like, I don't know, I assume we're working towards it, or there'll be an opportunity at some point to go off and do it, or because we haven't hit that stuff yet.
Right, and again, not spoiling anything for anybody on
Yeah.
this conversation, but none of it had to do with dragons, right? So
No.
None whatsoever.
yeah,
And I'm hoping the only reason why I'm in on this is because I'm hoping there's a big payday at the end of it.
Part of my duty does have to do with the dragon, though, so that's why I haven't tried to venture off or do something like that, because I am on track with the dragon thing.
Yeah.
Two of them.
And I want to get to Leslie in a second. So a couple questions came in. So how long has this campaign been going? So we actually did our session 0 at the end of September. It was the last time we got to meet in person. We were trying to do kind of mask and whatever, but then it just became too much of an issue. So we've been doing live for a little over 6 months. So going on our 10th session will be the next one. Character is about level 4. So it's still early and nascent, honestly. We've been trying to do every other week when we can.
But he's died yet.
Mikey said planet seeds take a little while to grow. Amen. Absolutely. There's a question: how does one start playing D&D and finding a group to play with? So just 2 things on that. One, we were all fortunate to be friends from something else entirely before we even got to this. When I decided I wanted to do this group, I originally started with a core group of 5 people that I thought from a chemistry perspective, everybody would get along and would work well. We added Mikey, who was also friends with everybody, and then Schilling, who plays Bog, is completely new. But again, these were all just acquaintances, friends, and others that we'd come across. Finding a group to play with locally, I would recommend 2 things. One is either online. There's a lot of groups now that have Dungeons & Dragons.
Discord might be your friend.
Yeah, and the other thing to do, as well as your local game stores, are another good place to find a group to play with. Many of them are still open to taking orders and so forth, but they can at least get you connected. So just a couple of suggestions on that front.
Finding someone who knows how to DM, I think is pretty. Ow! What the hell did I do there? Man, I'm finding all kinds of stuff that I've done to myself that I didn't realize I'd done. Plus, I've been working on motorcycles for the last 3 days, and you tend to get all kinds of things and hits from that. Finding someone who knows how to DM. I am very fortunate, and now I have a third friend, Ray. But before this, Mikey is a great DM. He's entertaining as hell, and he knows his stuff. And also my friend Pete, who I met through Mike. I think I met Pete originally through Molly and Val, but Mike, I think he's your cousin. But Pete is also Pete is the game master. He's into every card games, board games, tabletop games, role-playing it, you name it. Pete, he got me into there's a really great version of Jaws that's a board game that is hilarious to play. And tactically, it's really fun. And another one called Cash and Guns, which is like the end of Reservoir Dogs, which is another. But with Pete, we were playing before COVID a Star Trek RPG that I've talked about a couple of times, where it's much more collaborative and it's designed to be collaborative. If you put the right people on the right task, you have a better chance of succeeding. And there's certain dice rolls and little caches of I'll say incentives that you can bank and put towards things to give you a better shot at doing well. But Pete's also, like Mikey, is a really good storyteller and knows his stuff about the game. So finding someone who knows how to DM and knows when you do, like saving throws, or knows when you got to, do all the different modifiers and all that stuff, you got to find someone who knows how to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're kind of playing blind. And you're not learning how to play.
And a couple of the suggestions, because Mikey recommended local libraries too. That's another good call on. I was actually going to look at some of our local libraries as we get back to normalization and see about rent centers for kids after school or whatever. It isn't very long in the story, to Mirkwood Ware's point. It's especially with 7 characters. We're still very early in kind of scratching the surface of all these characters from a backstory perspective and even a chemistry perspective. And I agree that DMs can make or break the game. And you guys I've been honored to kind of DM for you guys. You've been, patient and accepting of me on this one, but I've been doing this for a long time too. The one thing I will say about that is find a DM who's at least played once, because some of the biggest challenges is finding DMs who just jumped in because they wanted to be the dungeon master and never played. And not having that player's perspective can be a detriment to many dungeons.
A lot of comic shops do gaming, and there is a specific place down in New Haven. I can't remember the name, but they're right across the street from Barcade. And they've got a playing room there. So, some of these places will have game nights that you can join in on as well.
Like here,
games.
Yeah, Danbury has Gamers Gambit. Norwalk has Battlegrounds Gaming. There's a few places out there. But look around. It's always good to support your local shops too. So, Leslie, we're going to get back to you finally. So what were, journeys so far, recognizing where you've been kind of in this journey. Any comments so far about the journey so far, surprises, anything like that?
I'm more curious how, or more intrigued by how everybody's character is developing, seeing character develop. That's fun. To me, that's fun. And seeing all the other like interactions is enjoyable, because it's kind of like an interaction in real life, but it's more on like imaginary as to something that you yourself, like, let's say you can't do in real life. And that to me is what kind of fascinates me to play and also enjoy it, because you can do things that you can't really do in real life. Like, I want to sit down in the front lines and I want to actually attack things, and I don't know why I'm very passive and soft in real life, and it's like in a game I'm like, cool, I get to kill something, that's awesome. So just seeing all these encounters with giant beasts and different monsters, I enjoy when you voice them.
Oh, thank you.
It makes me laugh. I wasn't expecting that. Makes the experience enjoyable and a lot better, especially seeing how we have to do it remote, not in the group together. That has been kind of hard for me personally, because I have a short attention span. So I'm like, when are we going to actually do it in person? So I want to be able to play and see everybody's, like you said, body language, and also see the different things that you're working on in person.
Yeah, I want to play with the castle.
Yeah.
There's all these awesome things you keep sending us. I'm like, we can't see it in person.
Well, it's funny because I've been, I've got a ton of terrain in the works and stuff I've been working on. Some of it is for things that I know we're eventually going to get to, hopefully in person. Some of it's just to build out my own collection of stuff. but I'm trying to find new. Like we've been using Owlbear for virtual tabletop, and I have to, Owlbear's been great. It's simple, it's easy to use. I've been using Dungeon Draft now to create some online maps that I can then import in Owlbear. But I'm working on trying to get at least some sort of camera setup so I can start to do some terrain, like real terrain, with your minis and camera, and we can
Yeah.
actually do that. The biggest challenge has been finding a way that allows you the flexibility of Owlbear to kind of like move your own token and with the so I don't have to keep going back and forth as we're trying to do this stuff. But I'm looking forward to the in-person piece because I miss that, both the body length, but also just the chance to show off the toys.
Yeah.
And just so you guys know, I even have a fog machine coming that'll help to.
Nice.
So a lot more to come.
You're gonna have us
So-
playing.
Yeah, overall, I'm kind of excited to see where this is all heading to, because I know I like how Deimos and Ian have explained. It's just a whole bunch of different things that I'm like trying to figure out how they connect and where it's taking us. And I'm kind of just trying to figure it out as I go along, because I'm like, why is this happening? Or like, where is this supposed to take us?
Well, and it's funny because Keith, you and I talked about this. I think with Schilling, like on one of the first ones that we did. This has been the story, and I expected it to, but the story as it's going now is very different from where I thought we were going to start. And so I've been adjusting this as we go, and I've been trying to give 2 to 3 potential paths each session, depending on actions taken, and then that forms the next session, which is why the 2-week prep time for me is nice because I get time to write what's going to happen or what I think is going to happen. But this is not the campaign I envisioned at the start by far. I thought the dragon was going to be later. You guys moved it up a lot quicker.
Yeah, they're like, oh, go on a dragon hunt. Sure.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Keith, your analogy on the Wizard of Oz, some of that also adjusted some of the approach that I had to take because I wanted to build you up to the point that you would be ready when you got there to at least have the encounter. Not necessarily to win, but to be ready for the encounter itself. So
We're looking at a total party kill, is what you just told us.
Right. But, well, there's different ways to avoid that, right? Sometimes running is the best option in a fight. But, it's been fun, and you guys, you kept it challenging for me because I don't know where things are going to go, which, to your point, Leslie, it's intriguing, and it keeps me coming back. But then, of course, I also have to go back and write what does come next after you guys make those decisions. So. So we're running close on time. I wanted to kind of give some time for some closing thoughts. So Keith, anything you wanted to mention or anything you wanted to get out on this one before we start to wrap up?
I don't think so.
Okay, that was easy.
You got anything? Was there something we talked about that you want to hit on, or?
No, I just we've talked about a lot here, which is great because I think we've hit everything I wanted to in a lot of organic conversation. But I just want to give everybody a little bit of a platform. Jay, what about you? Anything you wanted to talk about, bring up before we start to wrap?
Not really. Like as I comb through D&D Beyond, like I find myself asking, I was like, hey, is this possible? Like, how can we do this? Can we do that? And I'm just going through the list and like kind of taking notes as to because when I know we have a session on a Sunday, it's like half the day Saturday, I'm just like, okay, let me look up this video. Let me browse through somebody else's campaign. Let me do this and see if I can inject some of that goodness into our campaign. And then when I find things, I'm like, ooh, I was like, is this possible? How does this work? Yeah. And like with the caltrops, I can't wait to use those. And then other sick and twisted things that my brain can come up with. Looking forward to more sessions.
Leslie?
I'm looking to actually learning how to play the right way as we keep going. So I'm really excited about that so that I can actually do some really cool things. So after this, we definitely, you and I have to get together so that awesome things can happen and I have more things to talk about when we do these wandering.
So suggestion, and we can think about this for next session. So we should get together separately because we got to talk about the backstory. We can work on some of the other stuff with the combat and stuff too. Might be worthwhile to take one of these sessions at some point, get a couple of willing participants, including yourself, and just run through some simulated combat, or we could just focus on the learning aspect of it. Okay, what are my actions? So how do I work? How does initiative work? How do I work on my spells? Because I think it'd be informative for people who might watch this. For the 3 or 4 people out there on the internet who actually know we exist, but also for each other. So we can talk about that if you're comfortable with it. We can get a couple of different people. But Mikey stole my line here. There is no right or wrong way to play Dungeons and Dragons, and even the rules themselves are slightly flexible. Yes, my laminated handouts that I gave everybody. I do have a few of those floating around.
I knew I had that somewhere.
So thank you guys. This has been fun. It's great to see the baby, by the way. I can't wait to actually see the baby at some point.
How does she feel about playing? What's her character? Her character's like a
Bandit right now. My pet mouse.
your pet mouse. All right. How does
use? Yeah.
Jaylee feel about, playing a mouse?
Yeah, I only used him once, and that's about it. I need to be able to use him more often because he's very precious to me.
Sure.
Hi.
So again, thank you guys. We got distracted by the baby. Sorry, I got lost in the baby. Next week, the 2nd, we should be back with a session for the Wandering players. I know some people can't join us, including Ian. We'll see how that works itself out into the story, because I like to have things happen to players who can't be there. So stay tuned for that. That'll be fun. It won't be anything unrecoverable. You'll have all your limbs and everything, or at least most of it. We'll be back with the Wandering Players next week. Thank you guys for watching. This will be up on YouTube as well on Tuesdays, I believe we do the upload, and video on demand right after. And so until then, not all those who wander are lost. I keep forgetting to throw that line in, but it makes sense with the whole Wandering Players thing. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you guys.
Bye.